Good afternoon, Alain. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
It's very good to be here. This is now for me a very familiar place, and
Yeah,
I appreciate you hosting me again in your
with
home.
pleasure.
Alain, we are witnessing very special times, and even though we can say this in the Middle East almost every day, these are potentially transformational junctures, potentially. Can you tell us about, start with how did this ongoing campaign, Israel's campaign in Gaza, which is genocidal by most experts' opinions, what is it about this campaign that has affected French policy and the French political system to begin with?
Unfortunately, the policy of Israel in Gaza has not provoked a positive official reaction either from the government or in general from the political parties. There was in the beginning a complete support after the 7th October, condemnation of Hamas, and then after, even if the French politicians began to speak about that perhaps there were too many dead made by Israel, they continue to support. And I think they have really created in France something which is very special. And as I said, now I have been following this policy since 1967. I have never seen such a media and political campaign, not only to support Israel, but to criminalize any critic of Israel policy. And this is very worrying.
And is it a situation where you feel that the downs are going to be followed by some sort of an up? Is there any kind of reawakening or awakening of consciousness at some level that didn't exist before, given the actual severity and brutality of the campaign in Gaza, of Israel's campaign in Gaza?
Yes, I think, but we must understand why there was a change in the French politics. And not only Macron, but before him we had the socialist François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy, who is the heir of Gaullist policy, and all agreed on the fact that supporting Israel was now a main line of French policy. And this has completely changed from what we knew in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when we had De Gaulle, Chirac, Pompidou, etc., supporting the idea of Palestinian state, supporting PLO, etc. And I think the main reason of this change is that the fact that the French politicians and the media, which played a very negative role, now see this conflict not through the glass of an occupied country which tried to gain independence, and Palestinians tried to gain independence, which was the traditional French policy, even if they were not against Israel. I don't know, no political party asked for the destruction of Israel, etc. But they were at least saying we must discuss with the PLO, we must have a Palestinian state, etc. And because there was a people under occupation. And now the idea is not at all occupation, it is terrorism. The fact that Palestine is one of the multiple fronts of the war against terror. And in this war against terror, we feel, most of the politicians and the media feel that Israel is an ally, it's a democratic country like us, etc., etc. And this has changed since 11th of September, but little by little here with the terrorist attack of November 2015, and all this has contributed to a change with a very strong now policy against the Muslim in France, against Islamism, and under the guise of fighting against Islamism, there is a way to criminalize the Muslim population in France. And I think to understand the French policy on Palestine and Israel, we must understand this, that the fact that now we have a very strong extreme right called the Rassemblement National, who was created by Jean-Marie Le Pen, now with his daughter. Now, what they say is what most of the political parties are saying I mean, they have, especially the French government, is making the same speeches than the extreme right on all the migrants question, Islam, etc., etc. And this is, I mean, we take position on Palestine, I mean, again, French government policy, as if it was Islamic terrorism. And of course, the fact that Hamas was a major actor helped at this position of the French government.
And are we seeing some sort of an opportunity right now to actually do what a lot of people wanted to do? Because in the United States, we are seeing now a kind of hardline approach vis-a-vis, for instance, the critique of Israel, which has awkwardly, in many cases, aligned a lot of the supporters of Israel, especially American Jewry, which are usually liberal, with the right wing. And that has caused some, it's politically awkward. At the same time, it hasn't stopped. Is this dynamic happening here? And is it the kind of thing that will last if it's happening here? That kind of odd connection.
First, there is something, the criminalization of the support of Palestine has never been so strong. I mean, we have hundreds of people who have been brought to justice under the guise of supporting terrorism. And this is completely new. The way that now when you support Palestine, you support terrorism. And this is very problematic. And then you have the question of the alliance, if you want, how to say, one of the most striking things of what happened in France since the 7th of October was the way the Rassemblement National, meaning the extreme right, has been supported now by all the political parties in the name of fighting against anti-Semitism. And under the guise of anti-Semitism, now any critic of Israel is anti-Semitic. And when you say not only from the river to the sea or something, but even free Palestine, it's anti-Semitic, etc. And this is very, very dangerous.
Is the I want to go back to the French political system. Is it actually itself being affected by the war on Gaza? Are the alliances within the French political system changing as a result? Or are we seeing just more of the same, but with a lean towards a pro-Israel stance? Or is there something changing?
It's worse and worse. I mean, you must imagine that the right-wing opposition to Macron, which is called Les Républicains, they are the heir of de Gaulle, of the Gaullist party. They are asking today to bring the French embassy to Jerusalem. And what strikes me is that nobody asked them, I mean, are you really the heir of this Gaullist policy? And this is the right-wing party. Macron also has changed. I mean, 6-7 years, he has hardened the position concerning Israel. Even you speak, for example, their reaction to the International Court of Justice is very ambiguous. Again, they put in saying it's good to have Hamas accused. For the Israeli leaders, perhaps the Israeli system is able to bring them to justice. And you have this in the socialist parties. Even the Communist Party has been very divided on the question, and the leader of the Communist Party has said, we must bring Hamas to the International Court of Justice. I mean, things which were really difficult to imagine 20 years ago. And again, I think one of the main reasons is the fact that we don't look at it as a question of occupation, but as a question of fighting terrorism. And the fight against terror is, I don't know what it is. I mean, we agree, I think. Terror is not a political ideology. It's not something you fight. Terror. It's a way of fighting. You can condemn it or not. But under the guise of fight against terror, we are destroying all the ideas that there is an international justice. I mean, if you say that we fight against terror, they are, as some Israeli leaders say, we are not fighting human beings, you are fighting animals. And we don't, I mean, the international justice is for civilized people. We return back to, I mean, the time of colonies. During, I always say, at the end of the 19th century, there was a convention of the European country to say there are certain type of weapons we must not use. And there was something called bullet dum-dum. It was a bullet which enters your body and explodes. And the convention decided that it will not be used by the European country except against animals and in the colonies. And we are in the same situation now. I mean, we think that, again, even if you think that, I mean, perhaps we will discuss about what happened on the 7th October and there were crimes, etc., etc. In which name you say, I mean, you say that you can kill 35, 40,000 persons, destroying completely in the name of self-defense. I mean, you can't do it because you don't consider these people as human beings. And I think this is the position, I mean, of the public opinion in the media in France. Even, of course, it has changed since the 7th of October. We know, I mean, the propaganda on 7th October, I mean, it must have been the same in other countries, was terrible. I mean, the baby who were killed, the woman who is pregnant, which opened her body. But these lies, till now, you have leaders who say this happens. And when I discuss with normal people, they believe it till now because they don't follow the information like we do. And this has created an idea that they are not human beings.
Can you tell us a little bit about the transformation of the discourse on Palestine from the 80s and 90s and onwards, from a discourse on Palestine which was more favorable in France to something that what you sometimes talk about in terms of how it became an issue of terrorism, not an issue of cause of liberation?
When you discuss with French diplomats and you ask them, you tell them the policy of change of France has changed, they say no, we are still for the two-state solution, we are still against settlements, and it's true. I mean, as I said, every month you have a declaration of the foreign minister saying we are against settlements, and it goes in the basket of the Israeli foreign minister. Nobody read it. What has changed is the fact, not the principal position, but before there was a relation between the principal position, a two-state solution against settlement, and our bilateral relation with Israel. France didn't consider to have a normal relation with Israel if there was occupation. Now, not only we have normal relation, but we have, I mean, very close relation, economic, military, university, etc., etc. I mean, France has played a very important role to make of Israel not a member of the European Union, but it has privilege no other country has. And so, when France says we are for the two-state solution, Netanyahu laughs. He doesn't care if we say it, if this has no consequence. And we have seen it since 7th of October. The problem is we are now saying it's not, what's happening in Rafah is not good. So what are you doing? Are you taking any sanction? Are you making any pressure? No, you are only making declaration. And Netanyahu doesn't care of declaration. And it's important also to assess that Europe has, I mean, if Europe wants, it can help to stop the Gaza aggression of Israel. We are the principal market, European country are the principal market of export. We have a bilateral agreement between European Union and Israel which permit free trade. And we have in our agreement the idea that this agreement is conditioned to the respect of human rights. So we could stop this, and this will have very strong consequences, even on, you know, Israel say we are independent, we don't care what the Americans do, what the European Union, it's lie. For example, I remember during the first Intifada, when the Israeli government closed Birzeit University, European Union decided to suspend any agreement, university agreement with Israel. In 1 week, they opened the Birzeit University. And so,
when did this happen exactly?
Just in the beginning of the first Intifada.
Okay.
It's a long time ago.
80s.
It was a time when there was some pressure, but now, unfortunately, the ideology of supporting Israel now, especially the fact that all these Eastern countries entered the European Union and they are more Israelis than the Israeli, don't help. But at least France alone could take position. We hear, and I hope it will happen, that, for example, Spain, Belgium, Malta will recognize the Palestinian state. It's not the end of the world, but at least it's a positive step. But again, we feel in France that France is, at one moment it was at the vanguard of Europe. Now we are at the rear guard.
Since October 7th, has the discourse and the policies in France, we'll get to Europe in a minute, have the discourse and the policies in France changed in the past almost 8 months, or has it been a constant level of support, or did it go back and forth based on the level of ferocity and killing that's and then the deprivation and destruction that has taken place, or is it constant?
No, what is called, no, there have been some changes. Declaration, for example, support of the ceasefire. It has taken time. France has supported the entry of Palestinian state in the General Assembly. And so there are some change and some discourse. But at the same time, we have a problem here. I think the repression against the solidarity movement in France has been bigger than any other country, European country, except Germany. Really, it never happened. I mean, the fact that people are afraid to go to demonstration. I mean, it's and especially if they are from Muslim origin, because they will be accused of supporting terror, etc., etc. So, and also we had something. I mean, the media has been terrible. I mean, it has been one-sided, totally one-sided. The main media, of course, you have always different media. You have Orient, or you have Le Monde Diplomatique, but the main media has been. I haven't been invited once since the 7th of October in all this media.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, no, it's
for you.
It's a good sign, but it's a
bad development.
It's a bad sign. I mean, the worst was in the first weeks after 7th October. If you were invited, the first question: do you say that Hamas is a terrorist organization?
Do you condemn Hamas?
And if you don't say, I mean, you are finished, and you will not be invited. I mean, and this has also created a. This has linked with what's happening in France in the media. The fact that the extreme right now is a guy like Bolloré who has bought some of the media, etc. They are pressing in support of Israel, and this is it's very negative if you compare it with 20 years ago. You know, if you see at the French media since 1967, many people will say, it's in the hand of the lobby, etc., etc. In 1967, 80% of the media were in favor of Israel. The exception was de Gaulle, but he didn't have, even in his party, it was not easy, and he didn't have a media, I mean a newspaper, and the Communist Party, which at this time was very strong. It changed in the 70s and the 80s as a result of the Palestinian struggle on the ground. And little by little, I mean, the idea of supporting the Palestinians was at least among the journalists who are covering the Middle East, very wide. And this has changed, as I said, after 11 September and the fight against terror, etc. So it's not, it depends also political struggle. I mean, the media can do things, but if there are popular pressure, but you know, as I said, there are demonstrations in France, but they are not as big as they are in London or in other European countries.
In the 60s, speaking of journalism and journalists, Éric Rollot was one of the people who actually pushed for these causes. Was he an outlier?
You know, the problem with the media were very different. At this time, he was in Le Monde. He was the biggest newspaper, the most respected one. So he had a very important, he was an important voice. Now the media are not the written media. Most of the media are 24 hours television, and we have an Israeli television called e-television, which played a very negative role.
In Paris? In France?
Yeah. E-télé. And it has played a role, and you have C-News, which is in the hand of Bolloré, who is a guy of extreme right supporting Israel, etc., etc. So the difference, as I said sometimes, the people who are really covering the Middle East, in general, they are good. You may disagree with them, but they know what's happening on the ground. But when you have a crisis like after 7th October, you send there in Israel hundreds of journalists who don't know anything. They don't speak Arabic. And when they arrive in Israel, they are taken in hand by the Israeli government because they have people speaking French and who can easily answer questions, etc. It's fantastic that the French media has used very little the Palestinian journalists because they think that if they are Palestinians, they are lying. I mean, it's. But we accept anything said by a French Israeli citizen, who have double nationality, are French and who say exactly what the Israeli government is saying, and all this is creating a very difficult way for people who want to fight. Of course, again, it's easier today because we have seen the destruction of what's happening in Gaza. There are images, even if they are not so. If the French media were showing what's happening in Gaza in a regular basis, I think there will be a complete turnaround of the public opinion. But we do it it's very shy because the media don't want to accuse Israel. And if you accuse, if you have something, for example, if you have something about the Palestinians in Gaza, you will have something with the family of hostages in Israel. And as always, the Israelis are human beings. The Palestinians are not human beings. They are numbered here. In Europe, we don't see them as. It's very rare to have a portrait of a Gaza citizen who is living there. And it's possible. For example, Orient 21, we are a very small newspaper. We have a correspondent now for 3 months. 3 times a week he sends us he's in Rafah now. He was in Gaza after, he's in Rafah. He said, what's happening on the ground? And this way of seeing the Palestinians as human beings is unfortunately absent from the main media in France.
This is the organization or the publication that you run, Orient 21.
Well,
we will also highlight it. Absolutely. I do follow and I see that not just right now, actually. What about the non-traditional media? How much weight does it have in France?
Fortunately, we have this non-traditional media. We have platform on internet. You can see anything. As I said, all the opinion. This is different with a totalitarian country. You can find anything. If you want. But as I said, I always say this joke, which was brought to me by a friend, a Soviet journalist, at the end of the Gorbachev period. It was open, you could discuss very easily. And the American invited a Soviet delegation of journalists to go to see how the media are functioning in the United States. They make the tour of all Los Angeles, New York, etc. And at the end, they were received by the main journal in Washington. And the guy asked the Soviet journalist, how did you find our media? And one Soviet journalist said, it's fantastic. You don't have any censorship, and everybody thinks the same way.
In the US.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the extent to which student activism was repressed on campuses? Because we do know that from last week, they were brutally shut down. For the most part, I hear that there are a couple of encampments or people trying to get back.
Yeah, this is very strange because I remember, as I am old, that in 1968, the beginning of the events of 1968, when the police entered the Sorbonne. Now, the police enter everywhere. And there is no reaction, official reaction of the political parties. And also there is line, for example, one of the main vanguard of the movement was Sciences Politiques. L'Institut des Sciences Politiques is, they are forming the future leaders of the country. Very, very, very active, and it's also very international because some of the teaching are in English and they have many foreign students, etc. So they make a mobilization. You had an attack on them really incredible, and saying, the minister saying ils ont mis Sciences Po à feu et à sang. Saying they have burned it and then there was blood, etc. There was no incident. And so everything is like this. And the second thing, which is, I think, like in the United States, now the main question of the media when you speak about mobilization is they are anti-Semitic. They are anti-Semite. So it's not the problem how many people are in the street, what they are asked for, but they are anti-Semite. And the fact that now there is a complete extension of what is anti-Semitism. For most of the French media now, anti-Semitism is critics of Israel. And but the mobilization of students was important at one moment. The problem now is there are exams, and it's not as important. But it's interesting because it's a new generation, people who never have done politics before, and I think it will have consequence.
Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between France and the rest of Europe? We understand that Germany has been the most vicious in putting down protest and basically monitoring and suppressing free speech. And we know that France is also a strong case. What about the rest of Europe? And how do they compare to France and Germany, in your view?
Just on France, as I said, the main reason for this attack is the question of Islam. In France, you have this question of laïcité, the relation between the state and the church and the state. And since 2016-17 begins the idea of the fight against separatism. Separatism is the fact which is completely false, that the Muslims are organized, the French Muslims are organizing themselves in a close community, and they are threatening the Republic. And I think the hostility to Palestine is linked with this. I don't think in any other country it's the same thing. A very important book was published 1 month ago called La France, je l'aime mais je la quitte. France, I love it, but I quit. And it's hundreds of young cadres, which very successful, of Muslim origin, and which has been grow up in France, and who say, we cannot live in this country, because we are always attacked, as they will always question our loyalty to the French, our fact that perhaps we are terrorists, even if we drink wine and eat alcohol, they will and eat pork. They will question it. I mean, we cannot suppose. I mean, it's really difficult, and so they don't go. I mean, these people in general don't go in the 80s. There was some Muslim going to the Arab country because they wanted to live like Muslim. But here, it's not at all the question. They go to the United States, that to Great Britain. It's a big difference, I think, between France and all other European countries. In the other European countries, it depends really. I mean, for example, Belgium and Spain has been, and Portugal has been very. I mean, there was mobilization, stronger mobilization, and also a better position from their government. And in East Europe, I can't say in general, but as you know, in general, the Eastern country have supported Israel for other reasons.
And is far removed from the halls of power and decision making. So we don't hear very much actually about the halls.
Yes.
Is this peculiarity of the French condition and situation regarding how the Palestine issue is viewed through the Muslim lens or the Arab Muslim lens or the lens of Arabs and Muslims who are French and living here? Is it a function of the demographics, given the extent to which the percentage of Arabs and Muslims from North Africa, but also elsewhere, is substantial, or is it
I think it's created by the media. The reason now, what is new is that you have a new generation of French Muslims who are middle class and upper middle class, which didn't exist before. Before it was so. We can see them, and this is the difference. We have a problem of migration like in other countries, but now you have this television called C News and BFM TV with 24 hours information, and every day you will have something linked with Muslim. I mean, an incident in some.
A bad thing, not a good thing.
No, of course, a bad thing. Either it's Palestine, but it can be also an attack. And the idea that the Muslims are threatening our identity, are everywhere. They have, it's really like the Jews in the 30s. The idea that there is a plot by the Muslims who want to change the identity of the Republic. As I said to them, I have been working with many Muslim organizations, and I can say that they don't have any. I mean, you have very few members of parliament who are of Muslim origin. Very few mayors. It's very different from the United Kingdom, and they are divided, of course, between Algerian, Moroccan, Tunisian, between people from Africa and people from East. The idea that there is a plot, and it's really a mythology like was the Judeo-Bolshevik threat in the 30s.
It's not credible.
No, it's not credible. But I think it's very interesting to see the parallel, because also it's true, this has nothing to do with Palestine. We are in, France.
The parallel with what?
The 30s.
Oh, with the 30s.
We are in a existent economic, political crisis. We don't have, the political system has collapsed in some way. We don't have any more political parties in the sense 20 years ago. Macron has destroyed in some way the political system. And people don't know who to vote. They don't have perspective. And this also was a different. This unfortunately is very different from the 30s, because in the 30s at least, when you had this rise of racism and extreme right, the left Socialist Party and Communist Party has an alternative. Today you don't have alternative.
That's a very important point. You said something about the demographics of Arabs and Muslims in France and how they are occupying more and more on the socioeconomic ladder, higher positions in terms of class structure. Are these groups that have become part of the middle class and upper middle class from Arab and Muslim origins, are they changing their political orientation as they move up the social ladder?
No, no, for one reason, because nobody will forgive them to call themselves Muhammad or Fatima. Even people who are high level, as I said, these people who leave France, they succeed, but there is this racism against them in any way, which makes them impossible to enter the system completely. Of course, there are some who will do it, but in general, it's impossible. And this is also very different. I don't imagine one, like in Great Britain, for example, having a prime minister of Muslim origin. I mean, it's incredible.
So their allegiance to class is trumped by or
Yes.
overshadowed by their allegiance to their background, because the establishment makes it so, because they don't actually take them in.
Yeah. For example, you know, I have been traveling in the Middle East quite for long years, and for 20 years ago, I began to notice that many people in the French embassy were from Arab origin. Not ambassador, but middle or high level under ambassador. And I thought it was very positive. And some weeks ago, I discussed with a friend who is working in the foreign minister, and I told her this, and she told me, but now they feel that they are suspect, which, I mean, yeah.
So the distribution of roles stayed the same, but the trust in them has changed.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, means that it will be more difficult for them to become ambassadors. As people, I mean, it's not only the public sector. The people I spoke about in this book called France, I Love It, But I Quit, are people high level, I mean, in banks, I mean, private sector also. And this is really completely French. When you go at... Once I met a friend who was head of the Amnesty International, and she came in France to have a meeting of the women organization. It was 15 years ago, and she told me, I told her, how did you find? She was British, and I told, what did you find? And she told me, they are all white people. And this is a real problem. I mean, most of the people, I mean, are white people, and they don't, you know, this is a problem of universalism. We feel that the French, we don't make differences. So we don't see the difference, but there are differences.
Yeah, I don't see color is actually not as progressive as some people say, because if you don't see color, you don't see color at all, and that's not always good. Alain, I want to ask you about your recent book, People Who Won't Die. Can you show it to us?
Palestine, a people who don't want to die.
A people, Alain Gresh, Palestine, un peuple
qui ne veut pas
mourir. And I only read the excerpts and some reviews. I would like you to share with us, what is this book about, when you wrote it, and why you wrote it?
Of course, the main reason what's happening in Gaza and the fate of the Palestinian people.
Is this why you disappeared for a while?
Yes.
Okay.
And second, this is, of course, I mean, we don't want to elaborate, I mean, it's obvious. But there are two other reasons for writing the book. The first was the French policy, as I said, the fact, French policy and media, and how they distorted the realities, and how they are creating a situation in which, as I say, we created an atmosphere of justifying genocide. And this is second. And the third reason, which it's not directly with Palestine, but it says that how to say, Gaza is a test for the international relation system now. I mean, either we'll go to an international system without any rules, without international law, and considering that international law is only for white people and not for Palestinians. And this is at least the most dangerous part today. And this will justify, it's not in the favor of Western countries. It will justify tomorrow China with Taiwan or Russia or any country which will invade another country and say, okay, I mean, what's international law? And this is the main trend, unfortunately. And there is also a trend of the International Court of Justice. We have seen this case of genocide and the first ruling of the International Court of Justice, and then we seem to now how they are, I hope, going to go after Netanyahu and Gallant, etc., and to say we return to the international law for everybody. And I think it's really very dangerous because it's not only the fate of the Palestinian. You can say, okay, Palestinian is one. There are so many conflicts, I mean, Sudan and Congo, etc., etc. But here, it's a rule. I mean, we have seen it in when the attack of Russia against Ukraine happened. No non-Western country supported sanctions against Russia because they didn't believe that the West was going in support of Ukraine in the name of international law. And if we let what's happening in Gaza continue, we will have the same atmosphere. Okay, international law, you don't implement international law like Western countries. Why should we implement this international law?
When it comes to Russia and Ukraine?
Russia and Ukraine, I mean, tomorrow you can have 1,000 other conflicts. What are the rules of the game? Of course, after the Second World War, there were some rules of the game. We invented the Convention Against Genocide, the Law of War, Geneva Convention, etc. We know that they were not perfect, and we know that the implementation was not easy, but at least everybody accepted it. Now we are in a situation where the Western world is saying we don't accept them. We are not tied by the International Court, which has go after Netanyahu and Gallant. It's the first time that they go after white people. Before it was only, except
Milosevic?
No, because there was not at this moment. There was a special tribunal. They went after Putin. Otherwise, it was only African leaders, or African political leader or leader of military fraction. So we have a choice to make. I mean, the West is speaking about universal value, and really I agree with this. I mean, I think it's very important to fight that the idea that we have international law, international rule, etc. But if at the same time we are on the ground saying this law are not so important, why other people will believe us? And you know, one thing very important I didn't say. It's not the the fossé. The difference between the West and the rest of the world is going bigger now. And we see it in France in the question of our relation with the Maghreb. I really think that the French position in Maghreb is creating the way in which France will be expelled from the Maghreb. We have been expelled from Africa, from many African countries. Why? Because people in the Maghreb, and there's difference with, for example, Asia, they don't see, they can read about French policy, but it's very far. Here we have people who are looking at the French television, at the French media, and they are saying, okay, is this democracy? We don't want it. If you think that democracy is to support a genocide in Gaza, we don't want it. And it's all the political spectrum, from the Muslim Brothers to the communists. There is unanimity against France.
In the Maghreb.
In the Maghreb. And this is very... I don't want France to be expelled from the Maghreb. We have a historical relation, colonialism, etc., and I think it's important. And we should develop them in a positive sense. And now we are breaking the relation with them.
Can you briefly, if you don't mind, share with us the different chapters in the book, just the titles, so that people know what's in it?
After all, I said you don't know what's in the book. I made
the table of contents, basically.
No. One is about terrorism, the idea of terrorism and how it has been distorted. I have one about the history of Hamas and one why there was this Hamas. Why is Hamas so strong today, and the fact that it's also the result of the failing of any political solution, and that the Fatah have failed in its idea of having a Palestinian state. And then after I have two chapters about the media, one called the Israeli army in your saloon. Saloon? Le salon?
Salon, yeah.
Yeah, in your salon. We have a guy called Olivier Rafovich who is speaking in the name of the Israeli army, who is a French Israeli, and how they lie and how they... And after I have a chapter about anti-Semitism, good and bad anti-Semite, and showing how Israel is allied now more and more. All the extreme right, anti-Semitic extreme right is supporting Israel now, and this is very important because anti-Semitism is the way the French media and the French politicians try to shut you when you speak about Israel, and to show them that Israel is really the ally of the anti-Semite. And that's all. And after is a conclusion about, it's called Ce que Gaza fait au monde, what Gaza do to the world, to the international order. And
this is interestingly my last, I didn't intend for this to be the sort of common point, but this was sort of my last dimension, and that is, it's two parts. First, what has the conflict and in general, right? But now culminating in this genocide, and I usually don't use the word conflict, but just for brevity,
I agree.
how this current killing, literally, and criminal murder and starvation and so on, how might have this actually affected the world, and not just in terms of international law, but also in terms of international law, but also in terms of the discourse, in terms of the narratives of the West about itself and about the other. Do you think that we are witnessing some sort of a shift in these perceptions, or will things go back to business as usual once the quote-unquote dust settles?
No, unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic. Because the shift has not begun with Gaza, it has begun with the 11th of September. I quote a very interesting article of Agnès Calamar, who is General Secretary of Amnesty International, who shows how the war on terror has changed the rule of the game. If you can enter a country, invade a country without consequence, like Americans have done in Iraq, if you can torture, torture has been a wide, we have seen it with Abu Ghraib, how the American soldier has tortured people, etc. You are now returning back to a colonial view of the world. The fact that there are the civilized people and there are the barbarians who are terrorists. And I am afraid that this way of seeing the world is growing in the United States and is growing in Europe.
But you don't see what's happening in Gaza, the level of viciousness is going to affect at least how, for instance, Israel is viewed, and by connection, its supporters?
No, yes. In general, I'm an optimist. I don't want to give a bleak picture. No, I think Israel has lost many in this country. Has lost many things. We can say that since the Oslo Agreement and Israel, which was ostracized in most of the third world, has entered again. and now it is viewed negatively, even by the government, who are forced more or less to take position. I mean, the most courageous government has been in Latin America, which is very strange, because the Arab country has done nothing, and you have seen the president of Colombia stopping the diplomatic relation with Israel, etc., etc. So there is an isolation of Israel, which is in a part of the government and in the public opinion. I think there will be no turn back. I mean, I don't see how Israel can restore an image now in the world, especially the fact that we said it. I mean, everybody is attacking Netanyahu, but there is no difference between Netanyahu and the opposition, except that politician reasons. I mean, it's Gantz came. We have heard Gantz speaking about some days ago, saying, "I'm quitting the government." He's asking for the same thing as Netanyahu. I mean, a war against to finish with Hamas, to enter Rafah. I mean, he's not different, and this is one of the terrible things. Now you have in Israel, at least, you have 70 to 80% of the Israelis who are in favor of starving Gaza, people of Gaza. I mean, it's incredible.
Of starving.
Yeah, of starving them, and refusing to send food.
That's not nice.
No, it's not nice. We can say it like this.
Alain, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. I hope that we continue to do this.
I hope so.
It gives me a reason to come here and see you and converse with you. Unfortunately, last year when we spoke, we were, we of course, nobody anticipated what happened, but we were talking about the progress of the question of Islamophobia here in France, and I'm assuming that as a result of what happened, we're going to see a continuous rise.
Unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Allah يطمنك, as we say, sarcastically. طيب, is there anything else you'd like to say to people in the United States, including the people who are working on these topics? Is there a message from France, let's say, from you?
No, I will say, I mean, we have been very bleak in our assessment, but at the same time, as I said, I'm fundamentally optimistic. I think the resistance today we see in the United States, in different countries, of the people, of the Palestinian people, etc., must give us hope. I mean, the Palestinians are not going to capitulate. This is the old idea of, I quote in the book, I don't know which leader, who say, we won, it's only a question, it's settled, Israel won, but we need the Palestinians to accept that they were defeated. And they are not accepting it, and they will not accept it, and they need us. And I think it's, as I said, it's a universal cause. I said, for my generation, we had two universal causes, Vietnam in the 60s, South Africa, and today I think Palestine is a universal cause for all the world.
Speaking of hope, absolute last question. Speaking of hope in France, do you have the same sort of distinction between the younger generations and the older generations, where even those younger generations in the U.S. who come from Jewish families that are actually Zionist, not not critical, not pro international law, human rights, which means they would be critical of Israel, but even those who actually grew up as children of Zionist families have retracted and kind of like resigned or changed their views, or at least are neutral and against the Israeli military assault. Do we have that distinction in France?
It's difficult to say. As we were discussing this question of the Jews in France. The problem is the radical Jews, communists...
But all over.
All over, have never presented themselves as Jew.
I see.
And so the organized community is very, very right-wing and supporting 100% Israel. But we feel that now there is a new young generation of Jews called Tzedek, who organize themselves. They are very successful. They have many followers. And, the problem is in France, you are French. You can't say I'm Muslim. You can't say I'm Jew. You can't say I'm black. That's
kind of like Syria.
Yeah. So it was difficult at the moment to identify as Jew and left wing. But now you have this, and I think also the unconditional support of the organized Jewish community to Israel is hurting them.
All right. Well, we will revisit this when I come back, and I hope that some of the light at the end of the tunnel parts of our conversation bear fruit. Thanks again, Alain, for speaking with me and for welcoming me into your home. It means a lot to me, not just as a conversation, but also as a friend. Since I first interviewed you for our documentary on what is said about Arabs and terrorism in 2006, I think, I've always wanted to continue speaking with you, and I will as well continue.
Thank you very much.
شكرا حبيبي. سلام.
شكرا.